First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to hijack part of your time and talk to you today. I'm really excited because this is something that I'm really passionate about. I love working with others. I love helping people, teaching, and the quality space is something that I've been in for several years, and I'm just very passionate about quality and advocating for customers. So really happy to be here today and excited to chat with you. I wanted to talk about one aspect of the testing interview today, and that's the testing part, the actual testing questions that you're going to expect. There's a little bit of an overview, but it covers one main section in depth, and maybe at another time we can cover other sections. But really, as a hiring manager, I wanted to give you the perspective of what, if I was hiring for this position, what I'd be looking for. So yeah, first an introduction, who am I and why should you even listen to me? So here's a little bit about myself. I'm currently a senior manager of quality engineering. I've been in the testing discipline for about 19 years now. It's been a while. But again, it's something that I'm just passionate about. I've always enjoyed, and it's something that I really love doing. And then when it comes to management and hiring, I've done over 300 interviews at several different companies. And I've worked at a few companies that you might recognize, and along with a few others. But I've been a hiring manager for maybe 8 years now, and just seen a lot of candidates come through, and I've been privy to the background of hiring decisions, so I can give you some insight into what hiring managers are looking for. So let's start with a few general guidelines to any interview. And I'm sure some of this you might already know, but it's just setting up the context for what we're going to get into. First of all, if you're getting to this stage, congratulations. Your resume caught someone's attention, and they like what they saw. They're bringing you in, and now you are preparing for the actual interview. So you're going to do all the basic things like know the company, what the company is doing, the product that they're working on, the people that you're interviewing with. You're going to dress appropriately, one level above the job you're interviewing for. You know what questions to expect, and you've had a solid fundamental understanding of test methodologies and practices, kind of like attending a boot camp course. And you also have questions that you're prepared to ask. So there's two types of questions that you are going to be asked in an interview. There are the testing and more technical questions that cover, test this thing, test planning, how would you write a test case, how would you write a good bug. If you're applying for an SDET position, there's going to be a coding portion. And then there's another category of interview questions that are not so technical, but also really important. Things, situational or behavioral type questions. For example, tell me about a time when you disagreed with a decision about a bug. What did you do? What was the situation? What was the outcome? Maybe some problem solving tests. Some companies still maybe will ask like a riddle type question. Really, it's just to see how you approach problem solving in general. There's the typical questions that you should be ready for, things like, why do you want to work here? Why do you want to leave your current job? And then you're going to have time to ask questions. So I'm going to assume that you've prepared for all of this. And then what I really want to focus on today is the testing part, because this is really the make it or break it part. If you're applying for a QA position and you don't really nail this part of the interview, it's not likely that you will pass on to the next stage, even if you do well in the others, because this is the core skill that you need for this job. So what are hiring managers looking for? I tried to put them in broad categories, but this is what I would be looking for. Number one is testing knowledge. Again, to be successful in your job, in this position, you have to have that core fundamental understanding. Next is, I want to see some creativity when you're coming up with test cases. You want to break whatever it is that you've got your hands on. And with that, you also have a passion for quality, right? You care about what you're doing. You want to see a product go to customers that is high quality, that is free of defects, and just has a pleasant experience. And speaking of the customer, you want to advocate for the customer too, right? Because you want to put yourself in the shoes of the customer, understand how they're going to use it, and really kind of fight for a great experience for that customer. And finally, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can solve problems, any sort of problem, in a methodical, organized way, right? So you break a problem down, and you can get to a solution in an organized fashion. So again, this is what we're going to focus on today, is the testing knowledge and being able to generate creative test cases. And please, if anyone has any questions, feel free to interrupt throughout the way. I know there's, I'm focusing on a small part, but there's a lot of material here. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, virtually and or interrupt me and let me know. So a general approach to solving any question, and this can apply to any question you have. I broke it down into 4 parts here. One is understand a little bit more. Usually when you're asked a question, in some cases, it's intentionally vague, right? And that's because the interviewer wants to see what you're going to do when you're given some ambiguity. Do you make a lot of assumptions and just start working on a solution, or do you take some time to really understand what the problem is, get some more insight, and be able to come up with a better plan of how you're going to solve it first before just diving in? Next is, once you've understood what the problem space is, especially if it's a big area or there's still some ambiguity, you break it down into smaller sections. And again, this can apply to any type of question. For example, if you're asked a behavioral type question, you can use the STAR method. You say the situation or task, the action that you did, and what the result was. If it's a testing question, you break down whatever it is that you're going to test, and you also have different types of tests that you apply, and you methodically go through all of this. And same thing for a coding question, is after you've understood what it is that you're trying to solve and the boundaries, then you can start creating some of the methods that you're going to use in the outline, and then you can go into it. And so then step 3 is solve it, complete the answer. Once you have that information, then demonstrate that you can actually get to a solution. Some questions might not have a final solution, so to speak. It could be open-ended, but you're going to show that, yes, I can get to a reasonable answer in the time that I'm given with the information that I have. And most people stop here, but I added a 4th step, which is optimize. And I think this is critical. And I think back to a lot of times when I was being interviewed, and if there was something I didn't know, or I wasn't sure of my answer, I still had some doubt, oftentimes I would end with saying, just thinking out loud about what I could do to make my answer better. So if let's say I didn't get to a solution, or let's say I got to a solution, but I have some doubt if it's the best one. I start thinking, saying, well, how can I improve this? Are there bugs here? Is there something I didn't ask? How do I make my answer more complete, more robust? And I start going through the problem again and thinking, and a lot of times I feel like that is what kind of pushed me, to a yes answer. Just demonstrating that I'm not always just content and confident in that I have just the right solution, but I'm always looking to grow and to continuously improve. So I think that's a critical fourth step. So let's talk about the testing question. Yep. The question there?
No, I think you're good.
Thought I heard some. So without a doubt, in a testing interview, you will be asked to test. So you will be given something to test, and it could be anything. I have a few of my own favorite questions. A common one that I like to ask is test a calculator app, test a web-based calculator app, or sometimes I look for something in the room and I give it to the candidate and I say, how would you test this? Anything random. And to that question as well, there's a methodical way of going through it. And here really are the steps. The number one step, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is know thy customer. Know who is going to be using the product, how they're going to be using it, what is it's intended to, and this applies to anything. Even when I'm asked coding questions, write a method that does, validates if a string is a palindrome, or anything at all. I first ask, who is the customer? Even if it's a coding question, is this going to be in a library that's going to be used by other developers? Is this going to be a standalone method that is an API that's going to get called? Is this going to run on the web or on a client? So know exactly who the customer is, how it's going to be used, so you can better answer the question. And even if it seems obvious, just asking the question shows that you care about who the customer is and you want to know. So I'm always impressed by any candidate who starts by asking, who's the customer? Next, kind of an obvious one, but really understand the product and what it is you're trying to build, what it is you're trying to test, and the requirements. Again, a lot of times I see candidates jumping right into the solution, and sometimes they do well, but if they don't take a minute to ask some questions and really think about what the product is and consider all the boundaries and the requirements, they're not really going to have a great handle on the scope of the test and what needs to be done. And again, even if it seems simple, ask some questions, get some clarification, but also kind of, you don't want to overdo this step, because you want to feel out the interviewer. If they say, no, it's pretty simple, this is it, then say, okay, great, but at least you've asked the question. And another thing is you want to understand the different components of the system. So this is going to help you when you start breaking it down into different chunks and then being able to test it. Next is generate tests for each of the components of the system, and then each type of test. And I have a list here. This is not an exhaustive list, but for every test interview that I have, and even when I'm interviewing someone, I write down a list of the different types of tests that I could do. I've literally walked in with a paper that has these written on before, 2 interviews. One time I forgot this paper when I was being interviewed, and I asked the interviewer if I can use the whiteboard, and I wrote these down first so I wouldn't forget them, and then I went through them. And actually the person said, hey, I'm really impressed. I've never seen anyone list out these different types of verifications. And I thought it was a no-brainer, but apparently this wasn't something very common. But take a list with you, because you want to go through each and every single one of these. And there's more. come up with more. This is not the exhaustive list, but it's just something to get you started. And then, definitely be creative. Try to break whatever it is that you are testing. As a tester, you want to find those nasty bugs before customers do. And anyone can press a few buttons, but it really takes kind of a unique, twisted mind to really look at something and think of really nasty ways to break it. Because you know what? Customers end up doing that. And especially if you're working on a product that is going to be mass marketed, that it's going to go out to scale. If it's something that's going to be used by millions of customers or maybe millions of times, be sure that something weird will happen. Someone will try something weird. And so you better try it first before customers do, to know what happens. And then do not give up. I've tried to put the most important things on here. This really also is one of them. I could tell you personally that I have said no to candidates who give up too easily on generating test cases. They will start, they will say a few tests, and then they'll say, okay, I'm done. And then I'll ask, anything else? Is there anything else you would test? And they'll say, no, I think that's it. And that's an automatic no for me. If you think that in 2 minutes you can generate some tests and you can say a product is ready to ship, I don't want you on my team. I want someone who's never satisfied, never gives up, even if you are stuck, and we'll go through demonstration, never give up. And yeah, even if you get to a point where you really can't think of anything else, start talking out loud and say what you're thinking. That's all the tests I can come up with right now, but I wonder if there's more. I wonder if there's something weird that customers will do. And just start thinking out loud and wait for them to stop you. I can also tell you on the flip side of someone who stops too early, there are candidates who I take a lot of notes when I'm interviewing, and my fingers start to hurt because I'm typing so fast of all the tests they're generating, and I actually have to, and we're running out of time, and I have to tell them, okay, thank you, that's enough, that's good. And in most cases, that is a yes for me, that someone can creatively come up with a lot of test cases and I have to stop them. And then finally, optimize. Go back, look at your tests, think through some other tests, or maybe you've listed off a lot of tests. You start thinking about how you can cover the same surface area with fewer number of tests and just be better. Again, even if you can't do this, start thinking about it. Start talking out loud. Start wondering. Just asking the question out loud sometimes helps you, and even if it doesn't, it shows that you are thinking of how to improve, how to get better at your testing. All right. So let's take an example. Let's go through this process. And I intentionally chose a non-software object, a product to test, because I want to demonstrate that you can come up with creative test cases for just about anything. So for this example, the question is, how would you test a pencil? Come up with as many test cases to verify that a pencil is ready to ship. And that's it. That's the question. And now, the tables turn to you and it's your turn. So what I've done here is I've taken down these steps and I've answered them myself. I took about 1 hour to do this. I tried to actually limit my time so that, similar to an interview time, and I wrote these down, but I just want to show you, a way to approach this problem, how to think about it, and some possible answers that you can have. this is just scratching the surface. So as you go through this, think about why some of these answers are here, but also think about what you would ask, what other things you would test. And please, yeah, I think I have a few slides to cover this. If you have questions at the end of each slide, please let me know if you have questions and we can go. So
be sure to speak up, guys. If you got anything, chime in.
All right, let's start going through this. So first thing, if you remember, the first commandment is know thy customer. So I'm going to start asking some questions to better understand who the customer is and the product. So my first question is, who's the customer? And I'm actually going to start saying who possible customers are, right? Because sometimes the interviewer, maybe the interviewer never even considered it. He just wants you, he wants you to just test the pencil. But you are going to show that you care about the customer. You're going to consider how it's going to be used. So here's a few examples. First one I thought of was, is it going to be used in a school? Maybe it's going to go to art students, or maybe it's an elementary school, or because, and why am I asking that? Well, because I want to know how dark the pencil needs to write, how thick it needs to write. If it's used for art, maybe there's some requirements there. What about the age of the students? That's going to affect how big their fingers and hand size is. Are they right-handed, left-handed? How much pressure? Maybe this is going to go to small children, and they need to be able to write dark with applying not too much pressure. So I'm going to start thinking about these considerations. Another interesting customer here is maybe it's going to go to prisons. Maybe it's for like a prison education program, and we don't want the lead to be too sharp and too hard, right? For obvious reasons, we don't want to weaponize our product. So it's just thinking of different customers and trying to be creative. You might get a laugh out of this, which is great. If you can get your interviewer to laugh, you're 50% there. Not with, don't be a comedian, but you know what I mean. And then international. I think a lot of companies make the mistake of being very centric to their actual location. Every company is guilty of this. We tend to put blinders on and think of our immediate surroundings. But what about international? Is this going to ship to different countries? Is it going to ship in different languages? Again, even if the interviewer says, no, just the US, you've at least limited it, right? At least and now you can start generating tests based on this information. Next, I want to know more about the product itself. So does this pencil have an eraser? So maybe the interviewer handed you an actual pencil. Great. If you see an eraser on it, great. It's still good if you just ask the question and say, okay, I see an eraser on here. Are they all going to have erasers, right? Again, you want to know the product very well. How long is the pencil? Is it going to ship sharpened or unsharpened? What's the length going to be when it first ships? What's the color of the pencil? What is it supposed to be? Not just of the lead itself, but the outside of the pencil. What color is the eraser? And then requirements. How long should it write for before it needs sharpening? Is there a way to measure that? With a certain amount of pressure, how long do I have to write before it gets to the wood starts scratching, and I need to sharpen it again? Is there a requirement for that? Again, I want to know because I want to create a test that verifies this, and I want to know when that test should pass or when it should fail. And then so you know the customer, you understand the product, and you understand the different components of the product. And what you now have is the requirements that you need to create your test cases. You've broken down the product into several different components. You know how they interact together. And now it's time for the creative juices to really flow. And so I present to you our system under test, the pencil. It's, yep, just like you thought. It's the basic pencil. It's got a lead tip. It's got an eraser. These are the main components. Ignore the little metal thing for now, to keep it simple, to keep it really simple. And let's start testing this. So this is the main part now, where you're going to go through each of the different types of tests and come up with as many as you can. And you want to show, again, I have that list written down because when I'm trying to be very creative, sometimes I jump around a lot, but I try to go through this list one by one. And then, within an area, I can jump around a little, but I want to go through each one of these sections and make sure I cover it and come up with as many tests as I can. So, I'm taking that list that I had previously, and for each one of these, I have some, tests to consider. So first is the very basic functional test. Can it write on a standard white lined paper? Can it erase what I just wrote, right? This is your basic functional test. If this test fails, throw the product away, go back to the drawing board. Nothing else matters at this point. But cover the first basic functional test. Does it work as intended? Next, let's start getting into some more interesting tests here. What about error conditions? And some of these I might not know the answer, but I'm gonna try it, right? So I'm thinking, can this write on skin? Is it supposed to? What about underwater? Is it supposed to or not? Can this be, I don't have this written down, but can this be taken into outer space? Can you write with a pencil in outer space or not? What about on different materials like metals, on walls? Again, is it supposed to or is it not? I have little kids and I would love, I would pay extra to buy writing utensils that say that, easily removable from walls. So understand who the customer is, you can start generating test cases and think of these different conditions. Next, I'm gonna think about boundary conditions. So even, I got that functional test, but I want to test, the boundaries of what it is that I have. So usually your boundaries are, negative, positive, 0, and maybe sometimes at the end limits too, the upper limit, lower limit. So my tests here are, I'm gonna write after I first sharpen the pencil to see how it writes. I'm gonna write when it's at the shortest length that it could possibly write. I want to see, what the lead is like at different levels. And I'm going to do the same thing with the eraser. The first time I erase with the eraser, and then when the eraser gets really short, I want to see if it's still erasing the same. I might not know what the outcome is, but I'm going to test these and see. And then performance. Performance is, there's a few here that are really important: performance, security, accessibility, localization. These, if a candidate doesn't mention some of these, for me, I ding them. And then I ask them about it. I say, well, how would you test performance? So for a pencil, you might wonder, well, performance for a pencil, but here's some example of performance tests for a pencil. How long can I write before it needs to be sharpened again? That could be a performance test, right? What about under different temperatures? What happens to the lead at extreme low temperatures, extreme high temperatures? And maybe we know exactly what countries it ships to, and we know what the temperature range is, but what about other conditions? What about if this is being used in a factory somewhere where it's really cold or really hot? I want to test. I want to make sure that it's still going to perform the same under those conditions. What about how much I can bend it before it breaks. And some of these could also be security issues, and I'll go into that next. But you can kind of see what types of performance tests I could do. The tip pressure breakpoint. So, I mentioned it could ship to adults, it could ship to children, but I want to know what the average human pressure is when they are writing, because I don't want my pencil tip to break right away every time it's used. I want it to be robust enough so even someone who uses a lot of pressure is not going to break it right away. And then same thing with the eraser. How much can I erase before it's really worn down? What's my limit? How do I know it's performing well? And then what about erasing 1 month after I wrote something down? I don't know about lead, but I'm going to ask questions. I wonder if lead changes somehow or binds to certain types of paper differently over time. So if I know my requirements, if I know how it's going to be used, I can create a performance test that tests the requirements, but also goes beyond that too. So maybe erasing 1 month might not seem, or 1 month after writing might not seem like a common case, but I want to know what happens. Maybe, or maybe not even erasing, maybe the lead just comes off the paper after a month. That would be horrible. You take notes down and then you go back to look at it and nothing's there. So just think of ways to test for performance. Next is security. This is another one of areas that some people kind of scratch their head and say, well, there's no security test here, but think about it. So for a pencil, is lead toxic? What if someone eats the lead of the pencil? What if I get it on my skin? What happens? I don't know. I really don't know what. I hear lead poisoning, but I really don't know what materials in the pencil. I want to know. I want to learn, understand, and I want to create a security test. I want to make sure that my product is not going to harm customers, right? I don't want my company to go down over lead poisoning. So I'm going to test for this. Also, like I mentioned, this performance test where you have a breakpoint. What happens when the pencil breaks? Does it splinter into a million pieces and causes splinters? I want to make sure my product really is going to be secure in every sense of the word, right? So. And this is another area where I always ask candidates if they have not brought up security. I ask them, do you think there are any security tests that you can run here? Is there anything for security? And sometimes they'll say no security. And then I'll ask them again. I'll say, well, I wonder, is lead toxic? Is there anything you can do to make sure it's going to be safe to use? And if they still say no, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to reject this candidate, because even if they don't come up with actual security tests, I want to know that they're thinking about this. So security should be on everyone's mind. Next on the list, accessibility. So again, in the case of a pencil, can this be used by everyone? What different hands and finger sizes? What about someone who doesn't have all their fingers? I wonder how different people write. How do different people hold pencils? I don't want to think that I'm the only customer, and so I want to think through these considerations. And then I really struggled to find a typical accessibility test here. The only one I could think of was for someone who is visually impaired. Does my pencil feel the same as other writing utensils, or is it unique? Because if I can't see and I have a box of pencils or writing utensils, I want to be able to identify the pencil just by feeling it out. So again, I'm just curious. I wonder, and this could also be a localization issue. I wonder in other countries, or for art students, right? What are the other type of writing utensils? How is this going to be used next to them? And then I can come up with accessibility tests that says, hey, here are our competitors in the market, or here's what our customers are going to be using, and ours doesn't stand out. It feels just like all these other ones. And so for someone who's visually impaired, maybe, again, this might be an extreme case, but someone who's visually impaired but is working on an art piece, right? They want to generate something beautiful even though they can't really see it. I want to be able to have that customer identify my product and use it, not confuse it with something else. Internationalization. This is always an interesting one, and I like to see how people think here. But think of your product going out to different countries, and you might not know about other cultures. You might not be aware of, what customers in other locations are doing or care about, but at least ask the question. So remember, we asked kind of what color the pencil, the writing is going to be, and what color is the actual pencil. So think about this, and then different countries, different cultures have different meanings for different colors. So is this color going to be offensive to a certain country? Is it the standard? Is there a standard? And then what about shipping it to other customers? Is it going to go straight from the factory to international locations? Is there going to be a stop on the way? What about the packaging? What's the writing? Does it need to be in different languages, or maybe we shouldn't use a lot of words. If there's some instructions, maybe we should use pictures if it's going to ship to a lot of international customers and I don't have a lot of surface space to write. So how am I going to communicate important information about my product? And do all customers know how to use these type of pencils? What about sharpening them? Do they ship sharpened or not sharpened? Do I need to put something on there of how to sharpen it or how not to sharpen it, or a warning? So these are just, again, considerations of going to other countries and internationalization. Localization, so this is slightly different than internationalization. There might be some overlap, but localization is about the actual language that's being used. So this is me wondering out loud of, is there a universally accepted standard for pencils? Is there a symbol that says this is this type of pencil that I need to put on the pencil, or the labeling, the packaging? Again, I might not know, but I'm going to ask, I'm going to find out, I'm going to create tests for this type of area. Any questions so far here?
Nope. That's good here. All clear. Yeah, all clear.
I know I'm talking a lot, and that's never a good sign. So, and then next, so you've gone through this list of all the possible tests that you could think of, and you've done better than me. This is just the starting point. Next, what do you do? So if you are stuck, or even if the person is, if the interviewer is silent, which, basically says that they're waiting for something else, start thinking out loud. Don't stop there. And I kind of given you a few examples of how I think out loud, but for example, if you can't think of, a security test, just start saying, well, oh, gee, I can't think of a way to test security, but there probably is. I'm wondering, what about, how can it affect, writing on skin? What about different skin tones? I don't know. I mean, I could test on my own skin, but I wonder with people with different pigment levels, how's it going to affect them? Is that a security issue? Is that maybe an internationalization issue? I don't know, but I'll try to find out. Again, just show that you can think of security. And if you can't think of security tests for this product, think of security tests for other products and say, I've learned about cross-site scripting, buffer overflow, denial of service attacks, but I don't know how these would apply to this product. Let me think about this. What you've just demonstrated is, typical security attacks, how to test for them, and that you're going to consider these when you're testing a product. Even if you have not generated a single security test for the product you've been given, you've demonstrated that you are able to come up with security tests, and that goes a long way. It shows a lot of creativity on your part. Finally, optimize. So let's say you've gone through this list and think you're done. Don't stop there. Go back, think through it again, and think of ways to optimize the answer that you just gave. And there probably is a way to make it better and more efficient solution. So here are some ways to optimize this. Again, you can just start thinking out loud. So for the pencil, I wonder how many times do I need to test the writing before I'm confident that it's going to write well, and it's going to write well every time at different thickness levels. I wonder how many times do I really have to do this? So I'm going to test after I first sharpen, and I'm going to test at the shortest length. I'm going to test in the middle, but then what? Do I need more or do I need less? Can I be guaranteed that the lead itself is going to be the same consistency throughout the entire length of the pencil? Is there a way to know that? What about, if we're going to ship millions of pencils, do I have to run these 3 tests on I can't run them on, every single pencil before they ship, but how many pencils do I have to test before I've reached a statistically significant sample set, right? And for that, throughout the manufacturing process, how many times do I have to test this? Maybe when every shift, how often do workers change shift? Maybe the workers in the factory, maybe they have different skill levels. So I want to test and make sure that our pencil is going to hold up no matter who is making it in the factory. So again, I haven't set a single number yet. I haven't thrown out any specific tests or conditions, but I'm thinking through all these, and just that goes a really long way. So you've now, let's see, back here. So you've now gone through all your tests. Even if you're stuck, you've thought out loud, you've optimized, and your interviewer is super impressed. They cut you off. They tell you, okay, stop. Like, I give up. We're running out of time. Which is always a good sign. And you've done all this, and you have a smile on your face. Your interviewer's hands are, hurting because they've taken so many notes. And they're kind of looking at you in shock of how awesome you are as a tester. You kind of nailed this part. So how do you do this? How do you practice this? And really, there's no better way than to just do it. Pretend that you're being interviewed.
A little noise over here.
Pretend that you're being interviewed, or do a random search on Google or something. Pick a random object, pick a random app, pick a random functionality within an app. Take your favorite app. Maybe start with something and take functionality within it, like maybe Google Maps or Apple Maps, and just test searching, just the search functionality. Come up with as many test cases as you can. Write them down. Use that list of different test types. Come up, first with questions of who the customer is. Try to think of different customers. Know the product. Make some guesses, make some assumptions. That's fine. Do this with a friend. So have someone challenge you, right? someone who's, you know, a good tester, you know, maybe even a better tester than you, and go through this and tell them, okay, you're the interviewer. I'm going to come up with as many tests as I can, and I want you to challenge me. You know, come up with better tests than I do, or ask me questions that would help me come up with better test cases. And actually go through this process. Record yourself answering questions so you see, you know, what you look like when you're thinking, what you look like when you're stuck. You know, these could be kind of important because, like, when you are stuck, you still want to think out loud. You don't want to be quiet for too long, things like that. And also time yourself so you know how long you're taking. If you know your interview is going to be in, let's say, 45-minute increments, then you can assume that you're going to have one about testing, and the testing portion will be, you know, at least 30 minutes if that's the main part of it. How long can you can you talk about test cases and, you know, the whole process of knowing the customer, product, generating tests and optimizing? If you can't do this for 10 minutes, do it, keep trying. I would say that's the minimum. So again, if I'm doing this, if I'm hiring someone, I want to not talk for at least 10 minutes and have that person not stop talking for 10 minutes of just coming up with test cases. And finally, this might sound simple, but, you know, don't forget to smile and have fun. Someone gave me a tip years ago and said, before you walk into an interview or before you even get on a call with a recruiter or manager or anyone for a screen, smile. And it makes a difference. And it does, you know, it sounds cheesy, but before I pick up the phone, I'll, you know, smile and then pick up the phone, and I kind of start with that positive energy. And that also goes a long way if you can get your interviewer to smile or see that you're, you know, you have a positive attitude. They're actually more willing to help you or give you the benefit of the doubt, and have fun, right? At the end of the day, you know, whether or not you get this particular position that you're interviewing for, you are eventually going to get something great. So don't forget to smile and have fun along the way.
Thank you.
So that's it. I've talked for way too long, again, which is never a good sign. So any questions at all? I know I've you know, attacked just one part. It's a critical part, but one part of the interview process. I hope I've given you insight into what hiring managers are looking for and what a great answer is like. But I really want to know if anyone has any questions or just any sort of feedback at all. I'd love to hear from anyone.
I mean, about this, everything clear and was really interesting. Like, seemed like really helpful. Tips really like important. Yeah. So we're glad like to have this session with you. And about questions, I don't know. Maybe what about the answers which we can give to our interviewer that like kind of we're not really like professional on that, but we would like to not be on their eyes like that stupid, you know, and can answer like at least something. So how we can go with it, like how we, from which point we can start. I mean, like which like words to use, something. Any tips?
You mean, I want to make sure I understand your question here. So you're wondering if you're stuck or if you don't know where to start, how do you start?
Yes, I mean any like keywords maybe to not being like in their eyes, to being that dumb, you know.
So we're talking about a scenario that they ask you a question and you don't know the response exactly.
Yes, exact response. Yeah, and you like maybe can like rephrase your answer and make it make more smoothly, I would say.
Yeah. So it's totally okay to not understand, the question, or, not know where to start. That's okay. That happens to me too. What's not okay is to give up. So you have to show that, because you're going to get these situations in your job, right? You're going to be given a task maybe that you don't fully understand, or maybe you think you understand, but you really don't. And I want to see how you handle that situation. So if you are stuck in that case, start by understanding more, asking questions. As being interviewed myself, I've done this often where, I'll think about a question and it doesn't make sense at all, or maybe they ask me about something I have no idea about. And so I'll say, well, can you give me some more information? Or what do you mean by this? Just start getting the person to talk a little bit more. Maybe they did it on purpose. Some interviewers are kind of, cruel and nasty like that. Well, they'll ask you a question that almost doesn't make sense. They just want to see how you're going to react, right? So if you start sweating and clamming up and saying and walking out the door, no, there's their answer, right? So it's totally fine, but have that spirit of, even if I don't know something, I'm going to find out. Ask questions. Even as a senior manager in interviews, I've asked, if I don't know the meaning of a word, I'll say, what does blank mean? And they'll explain it, and I'll say, oh, okay. And they'll ask some more questions, and I'll answer. To me, that shows that someone who doesn't know has the ability to know. And I think that's, my dad's a electrical engineer. He worked at Boeing for several years before he retired. And he always says, engineers might not know, but they know how to learn. Yeah. And that's really the critical part. As a quality engineer, that is it's like a skill. It's hard to learn that, but if you know how to learn, you're going to be successful. Whatever you do. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So it was like first question, like, can you want to answer with words I don't know? What do you have to find instead of that?
Well, yeah, don't start with I don't know. But ask questions. Think that in your head.
I see.
Say like, I don't know. But tell me more about this. Can you expand the question a little bit? And by the way, all you guys here, you're doing the right first step, right? Like you asked me about what keywords to say and how to look intelligent. You are going to, because you're taking this course, you're learning about the fundamentals of testing. You're learning about the industry. So you already know a lot of this information, and you are going to use this when you do interview, and hopefully when you do get the job, you're going to use all this knowledge that you have. So I think you already have it inside you, and that's why I tried to stress the parts that that you maybe wouldn't pick up in a course or just online, but things that a method of answering that would help you through the interview process this way. So I wouldn't worry about looking dumb. I don't think I'm a great speaker myself. I say a lot. English is not my first language. I stutter a lot. I used to stutter even more. But sure, I'm working on these things, but I try to have a really positive attitude and never give up, learn, understand, and then do my best. And if the person across the table doesn't like that, I might not want to work for you. If you don't want, my ability to learn, my never give upness, and the knowledge I have and the abilities I have, if you don't want that, then I don't know if I even want to work for you. So I think you guys are going to do great.
It's really important. Yeah. Thanks.
I have one question. It's not necessary about the test part. It was really clear. Thank you for that. But the question that I found really hard to answer when you're taking an interview is, what would you do if a software developer or the business analyst disagrees with you on a certain issue? How would you, what would you do in this case? And if you can clarify on that, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, great question. Vlad, is it? Yeah, great question. That is a question I ask myself. I would expect to be asked. I can include it maybe in this course for, this presentation for next time, but I wanted to focus on the testing part. But yeah, let's answer this. So the question is, how would you respond to the question of, let's say you disagree with a decision about a bug, is that right?
Yes. So it's like you found a bug and you address it, but people disagree with you that it's a bug.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how I would answer this question and what I would look for someone to answer this question. And I'm going to use some of that same methodology to answer this question as well. Always, number one is first learn and understand. So I want to learn and understand more about the decision. I want to know who that person is. So maybe this developer or PM or dev manager, maybe they say no to all bugs, right? Maybe they're really stressed. Maybe they're very emotional, right? So I want to know a little bit about them and the way they made that decision. I want to know more about this particular bug, but also other bugs. Maybe I think this is a big issue, but when I look at all the other open bugs out there, maybe this really isn't the top priority, and I start agreeing with that decision. And then I want to look at the actual bug itself. Did I write it clearly? Do I have all the information in there to present a good argument? Maybe I don't. Maybe I need to include more of the customer impact. So if I can get data, can I get data? So the first part is really understand at the big picture, understand the person, the product, the customer, the issue. And then I would start diving a little bit deeper and gathering some more information, not just to understand, but to see if I can get some more data to sway the answer, or maybe convince myself that, yeah, I agree with this decision. So data is always good to provide, but what kind of data? So customer impact is great data. So if you can point out how this bug is going to affect customers, if you can get number or percentage of customers, what the impact is specifically, what they call it the user bad, to use a Microsoft term. Is this a little error? Is it recoverable? Is there going to be data loss? Is it a crash? Maybe it looks bad, but very few customers will hit it. Maybe it's a bad bug, but 0.01% of customers will encounter this issue. And even though we may want to fix it later, we have other higher priority issues to fix, right? So gather as much data as you can, put the information in the bug. And in my work myself, even as a senior test manager, sometimes I've taken, an hour to go through customer feedback, and I'll copy and paste customer feedback about this issue. One time I copied and pasted maybe about 20 different customer feedback. It was a minor issue. And I was able to convince the PM on another team to actually fix this bug because 20 customers complained about it. So gather some more information, put together an argument, and then go back, try to present your argument again, keep a positive attitude, assume positive intent. People who know me know that I say this a lot. So when you're talking to someone else, go smile, go with a positive attitude, assume that they care about the customer and the product and that they know what they're doing and they're smart and intelligent and passionate. and go with that attitude and say, hi, I wanted to talk to you about this issue. I looked into this a little bit more and I gathered some more information, and I was wondering if we can take another look through it. Right? So don't make this an adversarial thing. You know, your peers, your coworkers, you guys are friends here. You want to do what's best for the customer, present the data, and then let's make this difficult. Let's say the person says, no, you're stupid, right? Get out of my office. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't give up, right? If you are confident in what you have, don't give up. Look at who else makes a decision. Who else is responsible for triage? You know, one time, one of my peers once at Amazon had this situation, and there was a really nasty bug that the dev manager said, no, we're not going to fix this. And so my peer, he went to the director, and he said he wanted to show her something in the product and say, hey, I want to show you something really cool. You know, here's the new feature, and here's how it works. And then, oh, ooh, that's a nasty bug. And then she said, yeah, oh, that's horrible. We should fix this right now. Done. And I don't mean to go above someone's head, right? Because you're going to work with this person. You want to keep that relationship well. But think about creative ways that you can still get a different decision, especially if you're confident that this is the right thing for the customer. And finally, let's say you get shut down at every level. Maybe the answer is, okay, we're not going to fix this right now, but can we commit to fixing this in the next release? You know, and again, try to come up with as many creative ways not to give up. I don't want to hear if I'm interviewing you and I ask you this question, I don't want to hear you say, yeah, that's it. That's all I'll do. And I'm done. Right. Or I'll give up. I don't want to hear that. So think of, you know, maybe you can fix it yourself. Look at the code. You know, can you fix this yourself and send a code review? Yeah, that would be awesome. Get creative. Think of as many ways as you can, and don't give up.
George, let me add here something as well. So when you got such a question like, what would you do if developers not agree with you about this issue? I totally agree with all what George said. I would just want to add that we have to understand why he is denying that it's not an issue also. Because I got in that situation when both sides were actually right. I got an issue which is, from technical standpoint, from the code perspective, it wasn't an issue at all. Code was written good, but the business logic was wrong. The business logic was wrong. And he said that it's not an issue, but from my standpoint, doesn't make sense. Let me explain real quick, right? I like this example. The issue was that the thumbnail was displaying some certain numbers of let's say of the feature, right? But the correct number, but in the bottom it displayed that, for example, it should be 10 thumbnails, right? But it displayed 8. Where's 2 others? But I know that there should be 10. So from GUI, it's messed up. Something was wrong. And I went to the developers and they said, actually, from the code perspective, it's fine, just because the logic was this way, and it's supposed to show 8 instead of 10. I said, well, I understand that, but from user perspective, it just doesn't make sense. And for me personally, if I would be user, it's just confusing. That's it, right? Even from the code perspective, it was written okay. So what we did in this case, we just went up all the way to product manager. Then product manager said, well, technically, yeah, we would design another way, so it's supposed to be another bug. But since you brought it up again, let's go and figure out why that happened, because that thing was living there for forever, right? Nobody brought it up. So it went all the way up to actually higher up managers, and apparently they put it in the queue for fixing it, even if it was actually a bug, right? So I would say always try to understand why the other party also saying it's not a bug, and then you, as George said, just try to get as much information. And yeah, never say, okay, if it's not a bug, it's not a bug. It's better than answered, right? You have to, well, there was a situation when I wrote a bug, and they were asking, actually, it's not a bug. Could you please close the ticket? If you say, okay, I will close the ticket, you're in a bad situation. You should not close the ticket until you're like 100% sure that it's not an issue, or like, that's not your, you are not a decision maker to close this issue if it exists, right? Even somebody is asking you. Well, you have to 100% sure before making, because this is your basically responsibility. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, awesome presentation, George. I really liked it.
Well,
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
You talked a lot about optimized steps through interview, and can you clarify more about these steps? I mean, if I created a lot of regression test cases, optimized steps means I need to figure out how to improve my all steps.
Yeah, okay, very, very good question. So the point here is, think about in real life situation, you've generated, let's say, 1,000 test cases, right? And they take 2 days to run, all of them. But you're about to ship the product, and a day before you ship, you fix a bug, right? Oh, we found something, we fixed it, and we don't have time to run all our tests. So you're in the situation of optimizing. You have to prioritize what tests you're going to run. And so you want to take those 1,000 tests that take 2 days, and you want to get it down to 1 day or maybe even less. So the goal here is to think of, and there's different terms for this. You can think of, there's a concept called equivalency classing, which is you can take several tests and say, well, these 3 tests actually, in the software, they go through the same code path. So they're actually equivalent. They're testing the same thing. So I don't need to run all 3. I can run 1, and I would validate the same thing, right? So you can use that method, other methods, but the goal is to think of, how can I be confident in shipping this product with the least number of tests possible? And there's no right answer. This is this is what makes testing hard, is you can never run all your test cases. You will never ship with 0 bugs. There's always going to be issues that you know that you ship with, and issues that you don't know that you ship with. But a great tester, so a good tester comes up with a lot of tests. A great tester knows which tests to run at what time to maximize, to minimize risk before shipping. So this is where this really comes into play. So this part, you go back and you start thinking about ways to optimize. And, even if you haven't written them down, like if you just said them out loud, go back and start thinking of, what are the least number of tests I need to run before I'm confident that maybe just this small little component is ready to ship. So, in the pencil example I talked about, let's take just writing, right? So writing a certain darkness level. Okay, that's it. That's it. So how do I know that every pencil is going to write, is going to pass the darkness test, let's call it. I should come up with the technical term for this. That is going to pass the darkness test. Every pencil will, and every pencil will at different lengths of the pencil, right? It is impossible to test every single pencil before it ships, right? Literally, because you have to ship a pencil that's not used, right? So start thinking about how you're going to do that. How do I test this from the factory? How many times do I have to test it? What lengths of the pencil? Is the lead actually going to be consistent? Can I guarantee this? Maybe I don't even have to test it at all. Maybe the chemical itself of the lead is guaranteed. Maybe a property of lead itself is that, the chemical formula is actually the same throughout the entire pencil, right? So maybe I just have to test it once, make sure like, yeah, that really is the case, and I'm good. So this is what I'm talking about optimizing. And you can apply this to software. You can, there's, like I mentioned, equivalency classing. You can look at code paths of what is executed. You can look at inputs and outputs. You can do combinatorial matrix, right? There's tools out there that would let you look at all the different configurations, right? All the different combinations, and take something like, I did this at Amazon once, where we had, I think, 180,000 possible combinations. We eliminated them down to 10. And we were, I think, like 80% confident that we would cover 80% of the use cases with those 10 versus 180,000. So there's ways to do this, but it's real life, it's practical. And this is like what makes a good tester a great tester, is being able to think like this.
Thank you, George, for great tips.
You're welcome. Hope that helps.
I have one more question. Again, it's not regarding the actual test part of the interview, but another question that I have difficulty with is what are your biggest weaknesses? What is, like, because I know there are several camps of thought on that, how to answer, but yeah, if you can clarify on that, I would really appreciate.
I don't ask this question in interviews. I don't have a great answer myself. I'm sorry. I don't want to just, give you something that's not helpful. So I'm going to have to look that up and see. That's because I get that. I asked that, and I should probably know this myself, but I don't. Sorry.
I think it's like old style and old style of asking this question, like, what's your weakness and what's your strength, right? I mean, it's one of those, I don't like those questions either, but I've been asked a couple times when I did that. And, in all ways, like 5 years ago, the answer would be like, oh, my weakness is I work too much, this bullshit stuff. And nowadays, what I saw, and the better answer would be your honest answer, but not that honest. It's like you can say that, well, I can be distracted very easily, but you don't want, you want to tell them how do you overcome your weaknesses, right? You can say like, okay, I can be distracted. That's why I'm setting my, like, I turn off all my notification, for example, or I just set this some certain limited time for doing like bug hunting session and nothing else, and kind of those things. But again,
an answer that I always give for this question would be, I just had my answer too. I just lost it. My train of thought go. Something along the lines of, I can just become too detail oriented, or too consumed with a specific task, or I'll start focusing too much on like efficiencies of, oh no, now I remember my answer. It was going to be that I get bored if I'm not regularly challenged. That's my greatest weakness. If I'm not constantly challenged, if I'm not tackling new problems, I will get bored and lose interest. But then that also helps me pivot into my greatest strength, is that I am always seeking new challenges. I'm always seeking new knowledge. I'm always trying to learn new tools and see how I can apply it, right? So in my case, I had it set up for the weakness to pivot into my greatest strength as well. Now, I'm not saying say what I say, be honest and find something that applies to you. But if you can have something that, like, you know, complements each other and a way to overcome that issue, you're setting yourself up for a good response.
Yeah, it's like balancing to be very honest with balancing not to be like bullshitting.
Yeah, because it's true. If I get bored, man, I'm gonna leave. So keep me challenged, keep me engaged.
Yeah. And you know, it's a good question to be prepared for. You should be prepared for it. It gets asked. I don't like the question because it's easy to fake the answer, right? I don't know if the person's, I work too hard or something. So I usually ask a different question. I say, tell me something that consistently has shown up in your performance reviews in the past that's an area for improvement. Because I actually want to know what this person's managers have identified as a weakness consistently. Because most likely, you know, people, it's very hard to change. So I want to know what I'm getting, and I want that person to be as honest as possible. So if they can identify that, they can tell me that's most likely what I'm going to get.
All right, George, thank you for your presentation. We are running out of the time, so thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah, much appreciated, George.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your questions. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys giving me the time to chat.